Now we're going to talk about stems, and stems are just like a different organ in the plant body, just like roots. So I'm going to start covering the terminology of the stem, just so we can have some language that we're able to talk about the anatomy and physiology. So this is something you should know. When you have a stem, you have this area right here that where the leaf attaches, and that's called a node. So you can see there's a node here and a node here. And this is where the petiole, or this little handle for the leaf, attaches. And then the leaf, though, is the whole thing, the petiole and this area here that is called the leaf blade. So the blade and the petiole are what composes the leaf. And then between the nodes, you have internodes. And internodes are these areas between the nodes that support the stem. But let me talk about the node for a little bit. The node is an interesting part of the stem because it has these cells that are able to produce different organs. So it can produce new shoots, it can produce roots, it can produce flower stalks. Right here in this region, in this what I call the armpit of the stem, there is an area that has a bud, and we're going to talk about buds later. But this is just the most simple anatomy of a stem. Now, the stem has different functions. It supports the plant, but it also transports water, minerals, and photosynthetic things that were made on the leaves, like glucose. So it's a really important part of the plant, very important organ. So like I said, there are the leaves, the internodes, and nodes. So when talking about internodes, you can see here they may be different in sizes. Some internodes are really short, but the nodes, though, you can see this one is really easy to see. There's a little bud right there. Sometimes that bud is covered by a stipule, and a stipule is a modified leaf. And so sometimes you cannot see the bud, but if you peel this back, you'll be able to see the little bud right there. Okay, so there are different types of stems. There are herbaceous stems and there are woody stems. So herbaceous stems are stems of plants that do not produce wood tissues. This is an example right here is a cilantro. And then, of course, there are trees that produce wood and can get really tall and really strong, and we use the wood for all kinds of things, including construction. Now I'm going to talk about monocots and dicots again. If you remember, monocots are plants in the flowering plant group that only have one cotyledon. So the seed does not split. Dicots, on the other hand, have two cotyledons. So many dicots are woody. And monocots, on the other hand, do not form wood tissues, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Pine trees, though, are not flowering plants. They're gymnosperms, and we cover gymnosperms later on in the semester. But this is why I talk about many dicots are made up of wood, can make wood, and pine trees, on the other hand, are not dicots, but they're also able to produce wood tissues. Some dicots are herbaceous, like sunflowers and tomatoes. So you will never see a plant like that producing wood. On the other side, all monocots are herbaceous. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. One is grass. Everybody knows grass, or the grass family. The other one is bananas and taro. These are all monocots, yeah, so they're all herbaceous. Now, there are some monocots that can produce some really strong tissues, and some people would say that those are wood-like tissues or woody tissues. They're not true wood, so don't get fooled by that. They make really, really strong tissues, and if you cut this bamboo, for example, you would see that it's all fibers inside. It's not true wood. And bamboo has been used traditionally and also in modern construction buildings, but traditionally it's very strong. It can support a huge house, and this is a traditional house in the Amazon with bamboo on the roof supporting. And those roofs can last up to 10 years, so it's pretty amazing. Another example of a monocot that produces this woody-like tissues is Hala or pandanus. But again, if you cut that stem and you look inside, it's all fiber. It's not true wood. So don't get confused. Now, I want to bring you back here to this diagram that I started when I covered with roots. And now I just want to bring you back to the stem. So for the monocots, you have one cotyledon, you have fibrous root system, but when you look at the stem, if you look at the stem under the microscope, you would see that there are all these vascular bundles. They're scattered all over the stem. When you look at dicots, the stem has this ring pattern. So in these vascular bundles, I don't know if you remember, but there's xylem and phloem. Same thing here, xylem and phloem. So they look different under the microscope, and that's just another way of telling monocots versus dicots apart. Okay, so now I want to show you a little bit how the whole plant, the roots and the shoots kind of look alike together, and I'm going to talk about the vascular system that is combined with this photo. So we looked at roots before, yeah, all the way from the root cap, and if you remember, the root cap is protecting that apical meristem. And then you have that root, the region of elongation, and then those cells not just elongate, but they then diversify, and you have root hairs, and then you have the appearance of this vascular system in the root system that is xylem and phloem. So xylem again is this part here in red, and phloem is in blue. So xylem is always responsible for water uptake. So when water comes in through the root hairs, and remember, it always comes in through the root hairs. It's not going to come from the root cap. A lot of people get confused with that. They think the very tip of the root is responsible for water absorption. That's not the case at all. The root hairs are responsible, yeah? So when water comes in through here and it starts rushing up, it's through the xylem right here in red. In blue is the phloem. So the phloem is responsible for taking off all those sugars that are produced in photosynthesis down to the root or to any part of the plant where those sugars are needed for growth, or if the plant is fruiting or flowering. But then when we hit the soil line right here, and that water is able to flow all the way up, those tissues kind of get modified. And instead of looking like this when you cut the root, it was going to look like this on the stem. So this is the stem of a dicot where the vascular bundles are aligned in a circle. So there's this perfect circle. And again, if you look at the red part right here for xylem, this is the xylem right here in red. So it's color-coded, just so you have an idea. The same thing with the phloem. The phloem is in blue now. It's right here. And this stem has this division in the middle. We're going to look at this circle in a little bit. That's the cambium, a layer that is responsible for making new cells in the stem. Now, when you look at the leaf, and we're going to talk about leaves much later, but when you look at the leaf, look at this. The xylem is here and the phloem is here. So this is a good diagram because everything's color-coded. And if you look here, the very tip is the apical bud where the apical meristem is. So if you remember, roots also have an apical meristem all the way here behind the root cap. The other place where you can have an apical meristem is on the very tip of the shoot. So the apical bud is enclosing the apical meristem and protecting that area, just like the root cap protects the root of the meristem, the apical meristem in the root system. Now you have lateral buds, and you have your nodes, which are this region right here where the petiole attaches, yeah? And then you have the blade of the leaf, and together the petiole and the blade make up the leaf. Just so you can have an idea of the entire system now put together, root and shoot. Okay, so looking at monocot versus dicot again, remember that I told you that dicot has this really amazing pattern of xylem and phloem, and this is exactly the same right here. See, the phloem and the xylem is always in the middle. When you look at monocot, those vascular bundles are just scattered, and if you look closely, it looks like a little monkey or a little alien looking at you, big eyes and a giant forehead, and it's just how the xylem and phloem are aligned there in that vascular bundle. In the middle is always the ground tissue, and there are other parts too. Again, just a close up. Under the microscope, it'll look exactly like this. The dicots right here, ringed, and the monocots that only produce herbaceous stems. A good way to look at this, why would you have this ring structure of vascular bundle? So when you think about especially plants that are going to start making woody tissues, these rings, this is the very beginning of a ring system, yeah? So in a dicot that doesn't produce wood, maybe it's going to stay like this, but for dicots that are going to make several rings, so that tree is going to grow sideways in girth, it's going to make several rings, but it comes from this tissue right here. Okay, so again, under the microscope, monocots, the vascular bundle looks like a little alien, a little monkey looking at you. So that's just a good way to differentiate between the two. Dicots will look like this with xylem and phloem.